So what if Ryan Reynolds had one of those twins that doesn't look or act or live with you, named Bob Reynolds? Robert for the more distinguished among us. And what if he was like Superman, but a lot more broken and a lot more complex, the deeper inside his brain and story and powers that you've met, and maybe even more power? Well, then you would have someone like Marvel Comics' The Sentry, the Golden Guardian of Good, one of Marvel's oldest characters, but he actually only debuted in the year 2000. But you and I forgot about him just like everyone else did until 2000. Much like my Blue Marvel video, we have a bit of an interesting comic book timeline thing going on here. Sentry comes to our hands in the short mini-series, just after Marvel had undergone some interesting financial moves and started to re-establish themselves with grittier stories to excite fans again. They established the Marvel Knights line, which would bring about some of Marvel's best stories and some of the strangest at times, but that's for another video. Sentry was created by Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee and Rick Veitch. Feel free to correct me on the pronunciation of all of those names, but before we get too deep, let's jump into the story. Sentry, issue number 1, starts off with a man named Robert Reynolds, Bob. He wakes up in the middle of the night next to his wife Lindy with a shout. He tells his wife it's just a storm and he needs to let the dog out, but Bob knows something else is coming. Just like he knows he's living someone else's life right now. That's when he starts to pull out a bottle or two out of secret compartments from around his house, the professor's secret formula. But once he drinks it, it brings back the memories of a grander life, and they fill him with warmth. The warmth of a million exploding suns, which sounds extremely painful, but for Bob, it feels great. But it isn't long until Bob is struggling to put the pieces together. He knows who he is, the Sentry, or so he thinks. He has a super dog, maybe, the watchdog, but his nemesis, the Void. The Void is coming, but he is real, right? In a series of flashbacks, we're taken all over the map. This time we're taken back to Sentry fighting the Avengers of old against the Void. Then we have another memory in another popular comic format of someone named the Professor telling Sentry that the serum he takes creates a phase-shifting effect in the molecules of his body. That, in effect, causes each atom of his being to step an instant ahead of the current timeline. This also creates a photosynthetic reaction, creating a hyperstate of consciousness. The professor summarizes Sentry's powers are limitless in a sense. He conquered time and space, he is omnipotent, immortal even. But every time he takes the serum, the dosage has to be increased. He's potentially becoming too dependent on the drug itself, which just in these short few pages, we've already started to see. Every time he picks up a bottle, he says it's been years since and then he takes more. But the Void is coming. Bob is always the last line of defense against the Void. He has to repair the Conflictor, the only thing that can keep the Void at bay other than the Sentry himself. But his mind isn't like it once was. He needs something to help focus. He needs more serum. Just as he starts having another reaction to the serum, a voice comes from the shadows behind him. The voice coming from his dog. It's just pure nightmare fuel. His dog is now possessed by the Void. The Void tells Bob that he shouldn't have opened the door to him. Bob fires energy from his hand towards the creature, and as it evaporates, it taunts him further, calling him a dirty little junkie. The Void is all things. He is the Void. He is the face of Bob's soul. His wife is the Void. The house is the Void. And Bob screams, "You're not real." Lindy walks through the door, finding a disheveled Bob on his knees and the dog immobile on its side. Lindy asks him if he's kicked the dog and what the hell is going on. Bob tries to tell her it was the Void, not the dog. He's come back. She picks up the bottles and asks him what he's doing. Hiding his drinking now? He can't even ruin his life in front of her anymore? She talks about how he promised not to drink anymore, but it was just another one of his stupid lies again. She decides she's gonna go spend a few nights away. Take the dog with her, and Bob just says, okay. It's better if she goes, safer for her, thanks. So he finds his Sentry suit in the closet, and decides now is the time for vigilance. Now is the time for the Sentry to confront evil and remind the other heroes of who he is, so they can come together to stop the Void like all those years ago. And this, technically, is the end of the first appearance of Sentry. However, similarly to the other heroes of his kind, his first appearance isn't really best summed up in this first issue. It takes about 6 issues to fully cover Sentry's first appearance and just really appreciate him. So as the story continues, Bob is standing atop a crane in New York City, balancing precariously and reflecting on being there. Pay attention right now to how his Sentry suit looks right now as well. That's going to evolve slowly as people remember who he is. We learn more about Bob, how he's afraid of crowds, not in the, oh I really don't like crowds kind of way, but in the actual phobia kind of way. Cold sweats just thinking about it type of a thing. He goes on to tell us that he's 30 pounds overweight, he prefers cartoons to CNN or the news, and he does not like heights, which makes him wonder again, like us, how did he get up there? And then like a wave crashing on the shore, more memories hit him, with a little golden aura around his head. Something happened on top of the city just like he is now. It isn't long until Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four stretches his way up to Bob, questioning who he is, how did he bypass the security, and all the typical analytical Reed Richards type of questions. Bob doesn't really entertain much of that. Bob tries to get Reed to remember one thing, handing him a flower. Since it's clear he has no idea who this guy is, he asks Reed to remember a wedding, because Bob is going to need his help for what's coming. Something monumental, he says. As Reed and Bob both separate, they each ponder their interaction, thinking about this wedding. We get a glimpse into what this wedding of the Golden Guardian looked like. Much of Marvel's notable heroes were in attendance, Reed being Bob's best man. They have a touching interaction of sorts, and Bob gives Reed a unicorn statue, or figurine of some kind, something to remember him by should they lose touch. He jokes. Their interaction has a lot of subtle hints at all the great things the Sentry has done over the years, and the admiration the hero community has for Bob. But again, nobody remembers him. Reed and Susan start to have vague memories in the present day of this wedding, of some kind of wedding, and suddenly that unicorn, along with a VHS tape labeled wedding video, appear on their shelf. They kick Ben and Johnny off the couch to use the VCR and start the tape, just as Bob is realizing that he no longer has a shadow, and he's glowing on the subway. People start to give him a wider and wider berth, staring at. As the tape plays, Reed's face pops up on the screen, telling the Fantastic Four if they're watching this, then they're all as good as dead. The next issue opens up with Bob realizing he's changing. He's slowly changing into him, the Sentry, again. More parts of his suit are materializing to even him as more people remember bits and pieces of the mystery of the Sentry. With glowing eyes, he walks up to a solitary green giant, known well as the Hulk. He addresses him as Bruce, showing there's a unique relationship between Bob and the Hulk. But unlike when Bob interacted with Reed or anyone else, Hulk actually remembers our golden hero. Back at the Baxter building, the Fantastic Four is watching the rest of the tape, with Reed explaining that they probably feel something is off, but a man named Robert Reynolds probably came across their paths recently, and they need to believe him. But something big is coming, something called the Void, and it is the most dangerous thing that anybody's ever came across. But before he can give instructions on what to do, the tape warps and cuts off, and then the VCR itself explodes. While Bob is trying to cheer Hulk up, we're taken to the first site of desolation caused by the Void. It's an anomaly of sorts, and just a scene of untold horror with shadowy energy still lingering all around. Mr. Fantastic is trying to figure out who Bob Reynolds is, comparing the security footage to his database, finding the only record that they have digitally is of a Bob Reynolds that is dead, leading him to a search deeper in his records to the last manual records hidden on another level in the building. There he finds paper records of various feats of the Sentry, including a personal note from Sentry himself. Bob makes another visit drawing Spider-Man out. Spider-Man isn't convinced of anything, just like Reed wasn't at first, and Bob tells Peter to check into something that would be natural for Peter to check. Magazine records for a couple different publications. He tells him to check the numbering and find an answer within the missing issues. Stephen Strange adds levels of importance to the mystery of the Sentry. As Reed is looking over the documents, Stephen Strange appears, adding levels of importance to the mystery of the Sentry, confirming to Reed that he is in fact real, but he's gonna wish that he never knew about him. If Reed wants to know, it's a matter of which fate do they want. Knowing the answers to what he is seeking could lead to the end of their universe as they know it. Next issue opens with Reed and Stephen seeing a vision from their shared memories, where Reed asks Doctor Strange to do everything he can within his power to keep the world from remembering what they are about to erase. Robert continues visiting his old allies, this time contacting Professor Charles Xavier psychically or telepathically rather, which also provides us a new power that the Sentry is apparently capable of. And this is so familiar to Xavier that he recognizes the impression of Sentry in his mind, but it takes a little while for him to remember and thus ask the same question: where has the Sentry been? And is the Void coming back? Charles starts to realize and cancels the sessions that the X-Men were in. Charles is clearly spooked, to say the least. In Europe, the group known as the Superheroes of Europe is coordinating defense against a rapidly growing force of darkness, destroying heroes and civilians alike. They have no idea where it's coming from or what its power really is, but the attacking force is merciless. Back in New York, Peter Parker is digging into the missing magazine issues, just like Bob had mentioned to him. Suddenly, it starts to come back to him, everything that the Sentry was a part of and the legend of his name. Bob then makes a visit to see Tony Stark, jumping right into questions as his memory of what led to his disappearance is also starting to come back to him. He can't place it, he has no idea why he's so angry, but he knows they all turned on him. All the heroes, they turned on it, but he still doesn't know why. He does know Tony stood up for him. He was loyal to his legacy as the Sentry, but the other heroes are convinced that but in the memory, the other heroes are all convinced that the Void is going to return. And he even has Sentry in his memory admitting that the consensus of the group is that the Sentry must die to help remove the threat of the Void. Just before the close of the issue, two major pieces of Sentry's life reveal themselves. The Watchtower and Sentry's old sidekick, Billy, who suddenly remembers in a rush of memories, masked as a dream, about how his injuries came to be, how the Void had scarred him. Sentry disassembles the transmitter that's atop the Watchtower with ease, too much ease, realizing it would take someone who has intimate knowledge of his systems, his brain, his serum, his powers, and his tech to create something like this, hide the Sentry from everyone. And as he disassembles it, the world remembers. Rediscovering Sentry, the memorabilia of the golden hero of old, heroes, villains, everyone remembers the man, the hero, who died, and the dark entity that he battled too often, the Void. Sentry remembers being at his own funeral. He remembers how Reed betrayed him, his closest friend, his best man. He remembers how Reed told the world about Sentry never being one of them, one of the heroes. He was caught up in bribes and dealings with underworld money he needed for his addictions. Bob flies home with all these new memories, finding Lindy and Watchdog there for him. And Lindy remembers it all. She's a mess, realizing how she had treated Bob for so long, not knowing, not remembering who or what he was. And Bob talks about Reed's betrayal, the setup that led to him hiding away all these years. Before they can talk for long, the Void appears, grabbing Lindy, threatening to take her soul first. But he decides it'll be more satisfying to leave her for last, so that Bob knows it's coming. Bob asks the Void as he vanishes if that's why he came back. Bob asks the Void as he's vanishing if that's why he came back. If that's why the Void made Bob remember it all, just so he would have someone to take it all away from. The Void leaves a message with Lindy. Look inside. As storms are quickly approaching the northeastern United States, the Sentry makes a worldwide announcement announcing his return, but also the imminent threat of the Void. He challenges the heroes he once fought with to again come to his side to battle this immense evil once and for all. On Liberty Island, Hulk and Sentry stand waiting for the other heroes to hopefully take up his call to arms. It doesn't take long for them to start coming in. Spider-Man, Miss Marvel, Captain America, and Billy Turner, Sentry's old pal. And then Reed shows up, ominously floating towards Sentry. Bob lays into Reed, but Reed still doesn't remember why he did what he did or what the circumstances were. He just knows he did. This issue ends with Sentry contemplating the one thing every hero never needs in the moments right before a big battle: doubt. What if Sentry isn't a hero after all? What if what is coming for them all? What if the Void is too powerful? In the conclusion to Sentry's first appearance, we have Sentry versus the Void #1, a one-shot conclusion to the last 5 issues that we've just quickly gone over. The heroes are waiting in eager anticipation of the Void, ready in their minds for what they think is coming. The Void attacks without any pretense. The dark black anti-hurricane takes its first hero's life within seconds of landfall, crushing them under the concrete of the George Washington Bridge. Not even Doc Samson can get to them in time. Even Spider-Man's Doc Ock is there to help fight off the Void with the hero. Just as the battle is ramping up, Doctor Strange interrupts Reed for a moment, pausing time for just him and Reed. He helps Reed remember. He remembers the last time the Void attacked New York. Fantastic Four came upon the scene to find Bob in the aftermath of the destruction. Realizing Bob has just killed so many people, Susan screams at the sight of Bob himself. Bob has been the Void the entire time. Bob and the Void are in the middle of a battle as Bob starts to pull back a bit, a realization creeping up his spine in between punches. Reed and Steven continue to work through the past, that meeting of heroes and the decision to retire the Sentry. Everyone had realized he and the Void are the same. That night, Reed and Bob drank themselves as far as they could go, and Sentry opens up in a new way even for the two friends that they are. Rob doesn't think he can go back to just being Bob, just a guy. He wants to be the Sentry so badly still. But he knows what he has to do, and the limits he has in being able to contain the Void. So Reed comes up with a plan to make everyone forget who he is, who the Void is, including Bob. But Bob tells Reed it isn't enough. He's going to have to bury him too. So they come up with the lie about his addictions and criminal activities, taking bribes to murder people and steal for crime bosses and all. The negative reputation is essential for helping the hypnotic suggestion seat and take hold for the world. Reed confronts the Sentry with these new memories in the present day, hoping to jog Sentry's mind as well. It doesn't take long for Bob to see it all, realizing Reed helped Sentry set all this up. The transmitter, the tower, all of it. He remembers it all. He was leading it. The Void cries out, demanding his right to live. Sentry says the Void has become its own entity right now. Whatever control Bob once had, it isn't working anymore. And the only hope to stop this all is the transmitter, this time without any extra safeguards. The end of the world is quickly approaching as the void ramps up, destroying even more, giving Bob and Reed moments to activate the transmitter again. Bob takes a last look at the watchtower, says goodbye to his AI friend running the tower, Clock, and apologizes to Reed for remembering, for bringing this on the world again. Reed prepares enough data to convince himself that all this destruction was some kind of anomaly. This way he won't dig deeper and bring this all back on everyone again, either. Bob and Reed share a brief goodbye. Reed saying he was the first of them, the best of them, Sentry was the best man he ever knew. And it all fades to black. The last two panels are of the destruction, estimated in the tens of millions in New York City, as Bob and Lindy are in the car, on their way to a restaurant for food. Lindy's telling Bob that he has nothing to fear. Fear, his phobia, it's just a little black cloud in his brain telling him he's afraid. He isn't actually afraid or in danger of anything. They walk in and it's Billy working the counter at the burger place. Lindy thinks that Bob is staring at his missing appendage, but Bob has another flash of a memory, and with that he orders a chili dog. And this is where the Sentry first appears. This is the first full contained story, rather, of Sentry. Next, I would recommend reading through the first volume of Bendis's The New Avengers, right in the first issue, where Sentry is sort of launched again into the Marvel Universe, and from there he really starts to be used more frequently in the larger Marvel Universe and really gets going. In issue 1 of that series, Matt Murdock, Foggy, Luke Cage, and Jessica Drew are visiting the raft. Reed Richards has supposedly asked Matt to look into Robert Reynolds' case. Our good friend Bob has turned himself in and committed himself to the raft for killing his wife. And just as all of our heroes get to the cell, a massive prison break starts. In general, I will say the New Avengers of this era is a really interesting read. The art is pretty solid, which helps with the quirkier parts of the story too. But if you guys would like a full story overview on that run as well, just drop a comment and I'll add it to the list. My next story overview, where it's just full on story, is going to be the Black Canary and Zatanna Bloodspell story, just in case you're wondering what's next for story videos. But back to this, I will say Sentry's entry in New Avengers is sometimes overlooked as really convoluted or just something to get him into the Marvel Universe, and maybe I'm just nostalgic and seeing this through a different lens, but I was just kind of down with it the more I read into it, the more I kept reading through that series again for this video. Like, it's comic books. Why hate on it? It's all fantastical as it is. Comics are comics. We do find out more about his powers in that series, how they come to be, and the depths of what's going on inside Rob's mind, which really kind of starts that further deep dive that writers eventually take advantage of more. But anyways, at his core, Sentry, over the years, he becomes one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, possessing immense super strength, speed, durability, energy projection, flight, energy manipulation, telepathic abilities, and a bit. However, his impact in the superhero genre at large is often used as a sort of metaphor or even just a more direct comparison about the psychological cost of holding great power, embodied by his dark opposite, known as the Void, as we just talked about, a seemingly boundless dark force born from Bob's own mind. And a fun part of his character is that he's initially written as this character was a forgotten part of Marvel's Silver Age, with in-universe vintage stories that tie across the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Hulk, all of which did get fun, dedicated issues during the first Sentry run that we just covered. I do think the Hulk one from this era hits a little different. I enjoyed that one the most personally, but they are fun reading. If you've made it this far into the video, you'd probably like them. So on to Sentry's major team affiliations. His immense power often draws him into team books, and he just works really well in a team dynamic because you need a lot of supporting cast to really make Sentry work, in my opinion. So he's often in these universe-shaping events because he isn't ever just a character, but he often becomes this crisis management plot point when the writing needs that unexpected internal conflict or something bigger. And primarily, he's tied in with a lot of Avengers books. So New Avengers, like we talked about, that's essential reading just for how he gets set up and launched into Marvel, in my opinion. He appears as part of the team during the Civil War era, which, if you haven't read any of the Civil War era stuff, so much good reading in there. That's where I kind of started with Marvel and worked my way backwards and stuff. My personal favorite of all of Sentry's publications so far is the Dark Avengers run. Norman Osborn recruits Sentry during Dark Reign, and there's just a lot there. I think that would also make a really great video if anybody wants to see it. And then he does pop up for the Uncanny Avengers, which we kind of mentioned in the Wonder Man video, but he shows up as one of the Horsemen of Death, which would be absolutely terrifying. All of them are, and everything in any of these universes actually happening would probably be terrifying to some degree. But yeah, him as a horseman of death, just nightmare fuel again, just like his dog. And then there's this Siege era of Sentry, which takes place after Dark Avengers, which is a really interesting and a little brutal point of Sentry's life. And I will pause to say here, because Siege would also make anything Dark Avengers, Siege, all of that stuff would probably make a great video. And I just figured I would bring it up. If anyone has a character or storyline you'd like to see in another video, please let me know. I'd honestly do my best to respond fairly timely to comments, and I'm building out my schedule. And I always appreciate your input for future videos because I want to make stuff you guys want to see. So let me know. And then honorable mentions, these aren't team affiliations or anything, but I thought I would also mention there's a pretty notable fight in World War Hulk, and then there's some cool stuff in the King in Black story, which is just a really cool story as well. And he just kind of, Sentry happens to pop in there. So as far as essential reading goes, these are just some recommendations. I'll put them in the description as well. These are just to get you started on everything. So I obviously recommend reading what we just covered. So you have Sentry 1 through 5, and then Sentry versus the Void number 1. That's 2000 through 2001. Then you're going to want to look for New Avengers number 1 through 10. I just read all 10. Sentry isn't in all 10, but he's there at the beginning, and then you have sort of his first leg wrapping up in the last 3. Then you have his own book, and then you have his own book in 2006, and so you have 8 issues of that, so Sentry numbers 1 through 8. And then you have my favorite, Dark Avengers number 1 through 16. Those are perfect to me just for early Sentry reading, but if you want a little bit more, there's another Sentry book from 2018. So you got about 5 issues of that, and that's a little bit of a deeper dive into the psyche of Sentry. And then you also have the 2023-2024 4-issue sort of legacy of Sentry's powers in a more modern context, if you will. And that's your basics on who is Sentry. If you guys have added recommendations for people who want to know more about Sentry, feel free to drop those as well. And if you have a character you want to see spotlighted or a story, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.